Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to call this City Council meeting for Monday, April 4, 2022 to order. Madam Clerk, if you would please call the roll.
Councilmember Anderson has been excused. Councilmember Bell.
Here.
Councilmember Boki has been excused. Councilmember Brandstetter. Councilmember Farmer has been excused. Deputy Mayor Moss
Here.
and Mayor Whalen.
Present.
You have a quorum.
Thank you. It's always good to have a quorum. Well, please stand and join me in our Pledge of Allegiance to our nation's flag, followed by a brief moment of silence for those fallen officers in our region, as well as the families suffering from strife overseas in Ukraine. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Well, thank you for joining us this evening. We are pleased to have a proclamation tonight recognizing the 54th anniversary of the Fair Housing Act. And with this, we have Sean Martin, the CEO of Tacoma Pierce County Association of Realtors, who will receive the proclamation, and Councilmember Patty Bell will present. So Mr. Martin, if you join Councilmember Bell at the podium.
Hi, Sean. How are you? Good, you? Good. So I'm going to go ahead and read this. Whereas on April 11th, 1968, the Fair Housing Act was enacted into law, recognizing that no American should have the right to purchase or rent shelter of choice abridged because of race, color, religion, sex, handicap, familial status, national origin, sexual orientation, or gender identity. And whereas the year 2022 marks the 54th anniversary of this monumental Civil Rights Act of Congress, and whereas the City of Lakewood is committed to the mission and intent to provide fair and equal housing opportunities for all, and whereas equality of opportunity for all is fundamental policy of this nation and our state, and whereas discriminatory housing practices create racial and economic segregation in communities that can lead to disparate outcomes in overall quality of life, and whereas the City of Lakewood believes that access to fair housing laws have made our communities stronger and city more vibrant, and whereas the City of Lakewood is committed to promoting housing choices and fostering inclusive communities free from housing discrimination. Now, therefore, the Lakewood City Council do hereby recognize the 54th anniversary of the Fair Housing Act and recognize that many people and organizations in our communities who have opened the doors of housing opportunities to all residents. Proclaim this 4th day, April 2022. Mayor Jason Whelan. There you go. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Can you say something?
Sure, yeah. Good evening, Mr. Mayor and Council. My name is Sean Martin. I'm Tacoma Pierce County Association of Realtors CEO. First, would really like to thank both the Mayor and the Council for your willingness to be a partner with the real estate industry as we continue to pursue equality of opportunity and outcome for people of all communities. Every April, Realtors commemorate the passage of the Fair Housing Act of 1968 with events and education that shine a light on housing discrimination and segregation. Fair Housing Month signifies a recommitment to expanding equal access to housing. At Tacoma Pierce County Association of Realtors, we're proud to work in partnership with government, private housing providers, and our membership to promote best practices and education aimed at preventing discrimination and fostering diverse and inclusive communities. However, the importance of fair housing goes far beyond a list of do's and don'ts and rights and penalties. Habitat for Humanity cites that 74% of Habitat owners said their family's overall health improved after moving into their home. And according to studies in the journals of urban economics and housing studies, homeownership is shown to lead to increases in graduation rates and net family wealth. Unfortunately, in spite of all the progress made under the Fair Housing Act, gaps in home ownership rates between Black and white families are higher today than prior to the Act's passage in 1968. Realtors recognize the significance of the Fair Housing Act and reconfirm our commitment to upholding fair housing law, as well as our commitment to offering equal professional service to all in their search for real property. This evening's proclamation serves as recognition of how far we've come as a community and also educates us and shines a light on the progress yet to be achieved. As community leaders, we can all be a part of the transformative solution, providing equal service to all. Thank you again, Mr. Mayor and Council, for your support and recognition of fair housing. Fair housing is a critical tool needed to ensuring housing is accessible to all. We must strive together with our partners to define how to bring about a market that is truly open and provides equal housing opportunities. Realtors stand by our code of ethics and pledge daily to protect everyone's right to homeownership. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for coming tonight, Mr. Martin, members of the association. It's always good to see you. Mr. Larson, good to see another Lakewood resident. Thank you. Lakewood business owner. We now turn to an overview of Southsound 911. And if Deborah Grady, the executive director, and Julie Dorr, board chair of Southsound 911, will approach the podium and share a PowerPoint presentation with us. Thank you for coming. I think we could.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Thank you for the opportunity for us to provide you with a Southsound 911 update. We're really excited to be here. Earlier in the year, as the COVID restrictions lifted, Chair Dorr felt it would be very important for us to provide an opportunity to share an update on Southsound with all of our councils and our partner agencies. So we're excited you're the first entity that we get to do this with. So thank you again. I'm Deborah Grady, the executive director. And as the mayor mentioned, also here and participating as a presenter is our board chair, Julie Dorr. I'd also like to acknowledge and recognize Lakewood Council member Michael Brandstetter, who is a Southsound 911 board member and also is our finance committee chair. He has a great deal of involvement with Southsound, especially as we're developing and working on our budgets, and he participates in monthly meetings with us. Today, we would like to share some information with you so that you have an understanding of who Southsound 911 is, our journey to where we are today, what we do for the citizens and the partner agencies, what's next, and in our future. So to get started, Southsound 911 is the public safety answering point, also known as PSAP, a public safety answering point for the 38 county and municipal police and fire agencies in Pierce County. This means we, as the primary PSAP, we answer and process dispatching all 911 calls and routine calls for service for the public safety agencies we serve. Additionally, we partner with secondary PSAPs such as JBLM and the Mount Rainier Ranger Station. Those are PSAPs at the federal level considered secondary PSAPs, as well as WSP, the Washington State Patrol, Tacoma Fire at the local level, and the Puyallup Tribal Dispatch Center. Our 911 program team interacts with the state 911 office and other teams, 911 coordination teams throughout the state. In addition to the operational component of 911 call handling, our agency also supports the community and partner agencies by providing records and technical services to those agencies that have asked us to do so. So Southsound's journey began just before, in 2010, there were 6 911 centers or PSAPs in the county. Lisa was the predecessor to Southsound 911. The cities of Buckley, Fife, Puyallup, West Pierce Fire and Rescue, and Tacoma Fire Communications all had their own 911 centers. However, in 2011, members of the public safety community in Pierce County, along with elected officials, labor groups, and the community, envisioned a collaboration and a joining of these PSAPs. They all worked together to pass Proposition 1. Proposition 1 is the funding, the foundational funding that was required for Southsound 911 to become an entity. Specific uses for the sales tax dollars that are part of Proposition 1, a 0.1% sales tax, was for emergency communications, which includes 911, radio, and our Public Safety Communications Center, which is the new building you may have already heard about. Between 2012 and 2015, the predecessor law enforcement support agency, LISA, became Southsound 911. The agency first operated under an interlocal agreement, and we had two boards, a policy board and an operations board. So the operations board were the chiefs that made recommendations then to the policy board. During that period of time, the first agency joined the consolidation efforts. Between 2016 and 2021, work continued for the agency. The remaining 911 centers in the county joined Southsound's consolidation efforts. A strategic study was conducted, which had 3 recommendations or findings that were shared with the governing body and the operations board as well. And that related, the first one was a recommendation that we change or modify our business practice workflow, if you will, on the 911 communication center floor, so that when a caller calls 911, we reduce the transfer from that caller to another employee who would then handle a secondary function. So we have deemed this a term we call universal call taking. Universal call taking is an initiative that's underway at the agency right now for implementation. And what it really means is it's one stop for the caller. So if you call 911 in Pierce County, you will be talking to the same call taker that answers your phone call throughout the entire phone call experience. That study also recommended a change to the governance instead of an interlocal agreement. Chair Dorr will talk about the Public Development Authority that Southsound became in 2019, and also had some recommendations for a look at the radio systems, in that there are 2 radio systems in the county, one run by the county, the CCN it's called, as well as the city of Tacoma. In addition, in 2021, the facility that now houses all Southsound employees was completed and really was the last step to envision and realize the consolidation efforts that had been envisioned by all the original stakeholders. So prior to moving into this facility last year, Southsound 911 had employees working out of 4 different work sites, 1 in Puyallup, 2 downtown, but across from each other, and 1 over off of 35th Street. And by being able to bring all of our employees into one work site, one facility, means that we're going to be able to implement and move the culture into a unified organization instead of having physical separation, which creates physical distance and silos between the facilities and our work groups. To talk about the board of directors, I'd like to turn it over at this time to our chair, Julie Dorr.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. As Debbie said, I'm Julie Dorr, Chair of the Board of Directors for Southsound 911, and have the pleasure of serving with your colleague, Councilmember Brandstetter. Very much appreciate the opportunity to serve with him, and he's a right-hand man. If you would have heard my presentation to the new board member orientation, I basically have tasked Mike with every comma that exists in our financial policy, so we couldn't do it without him. Anyway, so as Debbie indicated, we have migrated from an ILA to a PDA, which is Public Development Authority. We did that in 2019, and that was chartered by the city of Tacoma. And that was the outcome of one of the strategic studies that we had. Our board is governed by bylaws. We have to sign an annual disclosure statement. We are held to a code of ethics. We have to, just like any other board, have to complete our OPMA and public records training. The board has elections each year for the positions of chair and vice chair. They're held in February. This year we ran into a little bit of a snafu in that we had our chair and vice chair cycling off the board. So we had to hold a little mini election in December and then again in February to address that. We have one standing committee, and that is our finance committee, and board member Brandstatter chairs that. The other members of that are Matt Holm, who is the chair of Central Pierce Fire and Rescue, Connor McCarthy. Thank you. Connor McCarthy from the city of Tacoma, and I serve on that with Mike. Any other committees are appointed by the chair and don't happen very frequently. We did have a work group last year to look at some of our funding options. So our board membership is determined by the communication assessments. So our first largest assessment is Pierce County, and representing Pierce County is Executive Dan Meyer and Chair Derek Young. The second largest is Tacoma, and that is those seats are represented by Connor McCarthy and Joe Bushnell. And Lakewood is the third one, represented by board member Brandstatter. Puyallup is the fourth largest assessment, and I hold that seat. The fifth, sixth, and seventh largest assessments rotate. They share 2 seats. So currently, Sumner Mayor Kathy Hayden just took that position from Kelly McClymans. He was serving on behalf of Bonnie Lake. And Pat Holsey from Fife just rotated on. The fire districts are represented also by assessment. And Central Pierce has 1 seat, which is Matt Holm. West Pierce has a 2nd seat, which is held by Dan Rankin. And the other 3 smaller agencies are represented by 1 seat, and they are appointed by the Pierce County Fire Commissioners Association. And Pat McElligott serves on that board. Let's see. And I think with that, I've covered my slides. I thank you for being here. And as Debbie said, it was important to me that we get out and talk to our member agencies. When we were putting together our orientation, I realized how little people knew about what we did. And speaking with other electeds, they didn't understand how we operate, what we do. So our intent here tonight is to make sure that we're accessible and available to you. And if we have great staff, if any questions, pick up the phone, and Mike knows how to get a hold of everybody. So we're trying to demystify 911. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
So now I'd like to talk just a little bit about what we do. And under this heading, we have our operations and our support services. So operations is everything that happens on the 911 center floor, which means all the 911 call handling and non-emergency call processing. So anytime a citizen needs to talk to one of our partner agencies, file a report, has a calls for service that they need responded to, whether it be police or fire, that takes place on the call center floor. A call taker answers their call, enters the information into our computer-aided dispatch system, which then routes the call based on the geographic location of the incident to the appropriate dispatcher, who will then dispatch the call. We also process text to 911 calls for service. The education piece behind this is if a citizen is in a place where they cannot make a voice call to 911, then text to 911 is an option. The primary radio functions are police, fire, and medical, all handled by Southsound 911. The protocols, we get asked questions about this quite a bit, so we wanted just to make sure you were all aware that the protocols for how calls are entered and dispatched and what the responses are going to be are determined by interaction with our partner agencies. So the chiefs are very involved in helping us set the protocols for what calls are entered, what calls are responded to based on their jurisdictional needs and decisions. We have a secondary radio function. So once in a unit in the field, predominantly the law agencies, say they make a traffic stop, they then go off of the primary talk group to a secondary talk group that we refer to as data dispatch. The data dispatchers handle requests from the field units, such as running people or plates or articles that they want to have checked to make sure that they're not stolen. Also, a number of our employees handle communication center telephone reports. So we offer that option, and some of the agencies take advantage of having us actually, based on the type of report, take it over the phone for them. Just wanted to share with you how busy we are. Southsound 911 is a very busy 911 center. In fact, we handled, as a single 911 center, we handled the largest call volume of 911 calls in Washington State last year. Last year, we also set a new norm, and that was we hit, except for the first quarter, over 50,000 911 calls a month. So we now range between 50 and 60,000 911 calls, where prior to 2021, we were down in the 40,000 a month calls. So you can see on this graph, this chart, in 2021 as compared to 2020, we had an increase in 911 call volume of about 15 to 16%. So our staff is very, very busy. The support services, under support services is our records department and technical services. Some of the partner agencies aren't aware that our public counter actually handles all the firearm transactions for most of the jurisdictions within the county. During COVID, we had a 155% increase in firearm transactions. We believe due to COVID and what was going on, and so we saw a big increase in both the number of transactions that were occurring in the county, as well as the number of requests for concealed pistol licenses. So our staff will fingerprint and then process those requests, providing background checks to make sure that the individuals who are either requesting to purchase a firearm or who would like to get a concealed pistol license can actually do so. Our technical services team is our support center, plus a wide variety of IT systems that are needed to run an operation like Southsound 911. We're very technically heavy. And in addition to maintaining our CAD, our 911 phones, our internal systems, our support center also provides help desk support to several of our smaller partner agencies that do not have technical staff of their own. So it's a really good partnership to work and to support those agencies. Our finance and human resources is what I'll talk about next. So for our 2022 budget, we have approved budget just over $50 million. There are 3 primary funding streams for Southsound 911. As I mentioned earlier, the 0.1% sales tax. We also, the largest form of revenue comes from the allocations that are paid by our partner agencies. And then we also receive an excise tax in the form of the 911 excise tax, which is the tax that is on every device that is enabled to call 911. On the sales tax, we often get asked what is it used for when we say emergency communications. So 57% of that tax revenue goes to operations. 25% is currently allocated to pay radio debt. We have 2 bonds that are currently anticipated to mature and be paid off by the end of 2023. And then 18% goes to pay for the facility that we talked about just a little bit earlier. Our expenditures, the largest area of our expenditures is going to be for communications. That's where our largest population of employees are, and that's where our technology use is the heaviest. We are a service organization, so the majority of our budget is actually spent on personnel and staffing. Our current employee count right now is 223. However, we're budgeted in 2022 for 245 employees. Just like other entities, we had a very challenging time during the pandemic, and especially last year, retaining and recruiting individuals into our workspace. So we've really stepped up and are very vigorously recruiting and putting out different initiatives which will help us attract and retain our staff. It costs us about $50,000 to get 1 employee independently working on the dispatch center floor. So it's very important for us to retain those folks once we get them hired with Southsound. So those are just a couple of the examples. We are participating in a iHeartMedia campaign that is estimated to reach about 3 million people from west of the Mississippi as far north as Canada down to the Mexico border, and then out this way. You also might have seen our advertising, recruiting, rolling around on the Pierce Transit buses just a couple of months ago. We have a community relations team that is very active. If you follow us on social media, either Instagram or Twitter or Facebook, you'll notice that we have a lot of activity going on pretty regularly. We post about different activities our community members are engaged in, our community relations team are engaged in, which is going out and about and interacting with the partner agencies. Now that COVID's back open, has allowed things to open back up, we can get out and actually be at events with our partners. Falling under community relations is 911 education. So this year we were, we were grateful the board approved a 911 educator for our organization so that we could take this to a little bit greater measures. We also just on social media launched a volunteer program, and so far have had about a half a dozen people interested in joining the agency and serving as a volunteer. This slide we just wanted to point out. We have an employee-driven charitable group team that is called Southsound 911 Cares, and during the holidays they take it upon themselves to solicit from within the organization donations, both in adopting families, monetary and food drive donations, so we can help out during the holidays. So what does the future look like for Southsound 911? We're going to be very busy, as we have been, but all of these topics here are currently underway, and you may hear your police chief talking about the records management system replacement, that we have a work group of the agencies have supplied personnel to meet with us and help us determine what the next records management system is going to be to meet the needs of the partner agencies. I mentioned universal call taking. We're very pleased to report that the state reached out to us, the state 911 office reached out to us recently to help them implement and deploy a product or a program called emergency call routing function, which will increase the accuracy of where 911 wireless callers are, which is really, really exciting for 911 centers to have better location accuracy, especially on the wireless devices. The 988 and crisis calls, that's a state initiative that is going to be working with the 911 office. And really what it's going to do this year is take that 10-digit National Suicide Hotline and associate it to where it'll actually hit the 988 or a 3-digit number, so that people don't have to remember a 10-digit number. Simplifies the process of them trying to get help for both suicide prevention and those individuals who are experiencing a mental health crisis. We have a strategic retreat coming up in June, the June 8th date. You are all welcome and invited to participate and be present at that meeting. We believe it's time, with the bonds being paid off, with some requests coming into Southsound for funding, and knowing that the radios that are being used by the subscribers, the police and the fire employees, that the portables and the mobiles are expiring with support and maintenance somewhere in the time frame of 2025. And so we want to be able to have opportunity to hear from the chiefs, the stakeholders, about what the initiatives are that they would like to see the agency move forward with. In addition, we know the 0.1% will expire in 2036. And as part of the discussion and agenda, it will be figuring out strategically when we would want to put that back on the ballot to remove the sunset of that funding source. And I am happy to take any questions. Myself, Chair Dorr, or our finance chair, I'm sure would be happy to participate in answering any questions as well.
I'm sure Mr. Branstad already has all the answers, but I'll ask a few questions anyway. On the sunsetting of the 0.1%, is that date post the date that the bonds are done and paid for the building?
The building bonds will be paid off in 2036 as well. So the building bonds they coincide with the expiration of the 110.
Great. And on the calls for service between the regular calls for service and the non-emergency, I saw the non-emergency go down. Is it because people are categorizing their call as emergency more often than not? Is that the differential between the two categories of calls?
I think a couple of things are probably going on. We're very actively promoting the online reporting tool that's available to people for non-emergency calls. And also the level of emergency calls has significantly gone up. We shared some statistics with the board at a prior board meeting, just the volume of the calls we're seeing that are certainly of a greater priority. And so I think people are calling just because they're feeling their situation is more emergent than it is a non-emergency in nature.
And on the slide with the level of calls for service over the course of the last 5 years, is there data that would tell us the categories or the types of calls that you're receiving? For instance, you mentioned mental health. I know we have a youth council member that's going to talk about the importance of mental health for youth. But it would be interesting to know the data, how a percentage of calls that are related to that versus fire or domestic violence or crime in occurrence, those kinds of things. Do you maintain that data, I assume?
We do, and I'd be happy to share it with you.
Great. Any other questions? Members of the council? Mr. Brandstatter.
Well, first of all, I'd like to thank Executive Director Grady and Board Chair Dorr, my colleagues at Southsound 911 for being here and updating us as you intend to do for all the partners. But I guess I'd like just to append a couple of remarks for you and my colleagues here. And the first is it's that while Southsound 911 utilizes a great many technology tools to do its work, it is first and foremost an organization of people who do things for other people to be able to go and do that. And and we really appreciate it. Just recently, the state legislature has taken action to officially recognize the call takers at South and 911 centers as first responders. And that's of no particular surprise, I think, to many of the people that have called 911 with a serious issue and have had a call taker stay with them for a considerable length of time through getting to a resolution or of getting help to them to be able to go and do that. But that's I think that's important to know that as we go through our things of recognizing first responders, that we include the call takers at Southsound 911 in that family of folks to do that and recognize them. And I've appreciated working with all of the folks at 911 on the government side, because first and foremost, they all recognize that what they want to get done most is to provide the best possible public safety service, both to the public and to the first responders that are out there on the street being able to go through and do things. So we're fortunate to have an organization that has professionals from top to bottom in its serving our community and serving Pierce County. And personally, it's been a while now that I have gotten past the fact that Southsound 911 stole our city manager back in 2012. But I've been able to put that in the past.
Indeed. Well, thank you, Mr. Brandstatter. Thank you both for coming. It's great to have the education and overview and at least 3 of the 4 of us have been here long enough to remember when we put it to a vote to get the 1/10 of 1% and the initial ILA that promulgated the major change. And so we're proud to see the growth and certainly the responsiveness to the community. So thanks for coming. And now, before we call on Mr. Jones for the Youth Council, I was remiss in inviting the recipient of the proclamation up for a group photograph because I know they brought some folks with them tonight, and we usually try to do that. So, Mr. Martin, if you have members of your organization would like to come up front. And I believe Mr. Kopriva is around somewhere, hopefully. If not, we have our able assistant city clerk, complete with cell phone. Thank you. Oh, it's okay. Yeah, we just have to, we usually do that, but someone has to kick me once in a while, right, Hank? Next, we are pleased to have Hank Jones with our Youth Council to give us a report and to share a PowerPoint with us. Mr. Jones.
Hello and good evening to Mayor Whalen and the Lakewood City Council. My name is Hank Jones and I am a member of the Youth Council. Today, I wish to speak to you on behalf of the youth of our city on a topic that is critical to our development into adulthood, and that is our mental well-being. I think it is in the interest of the Youth Council, the City Council, and the community at large to address issues surrounding youth mental health to ensure that the future of our city is in able hands. The first thing that I would like to speak to in this presentation are the mental wellness struggles being faced by the youth of our city right now. When I asked my fellow youth council members what they've seen from their peers, we have recorded observations of anxiety, depression, ADHD, and trauma throughout our schools. This is cause for concern. We know that suicide is the #2 cause of death for teenagers, according to the National Institute of Health. That's right behind car accidents. And suicide rates are climbing in Washington State. In fact, a survey from 2016 from the Washington Department of Social and Health Services found that 1 in 5 high school students in this state had considered suicide over the past 12 months. Now, of course, that data is a little old, and I cannot find a more recent statistic, but that data has shown an upward trend. And this survey was taken before the global pandemic and before the academic and social structures of students were entirely upended. I think that the council would join my presumption that the 2022 numbers are likely much worse. Youth mental health has become one of the biggest buzz terms among organizations of academic and political authority, and for good reason. This issue is complex and multifaceted and difficult to tangibly address. I find it important to note that students often feel that they are not given the opportunity to speak from their perspectives. There are limited opportunities for youth to speak up on what they would like to see change in schools and student organizations. and that their advice is not heeded. We're lucky that in Lakewood we have things like the Youth Council, which is a sort of representative body for students with clout and influence that can drive the agenda of policy. So with that in mind, I asked our Youth Council members for this presentation what they think the causes are of poor youth mental health. And their responses are seen on screen as their direct quotes. Feeling disconnected from school and friends. They don't know where to reach out for help, or help isn't available to me. Kids are not getting their schoolwork done. And when they try, they cannot focus on it. Students are forgetting how to interact with people and feeling isolated. Students don't feel ambitious or motivated for their future. Students are struggling to focus and stay on top of their schoolwork, and simply anxiety in school is felt among students. I think I received a lot of input from my peers and have built a strong consensus as to what the issues are and why they need to be addressed. The next step naturally was to talk about solutions and remedies for these problems. But in exploring that, we discovered that there are vast and intertwining influences in mental well-being that I want to quickly cover. We established that the well-being of an individual is influenced mainly by global events, cultural affairs, and also by personal actions and their consequences. And I would say that very few students would blame their mental health struggles on schools, on municipalities, on organizations themselves, or associated personnel. That is not to say, of course, that school and community leaders cannot have a profound impact on the students of this city that are seeking support, because they can. I also want to caution that this is based on my interactions with my peers as well. Some students will not seek support at all. And I think it's important for us to acknowledge and distinguish between students who need help, students who do not need help, and students who do not want help. And that even any perfect variety of solutions, flawlessly executed by leaders of this city, will not chase this problem away totally, given its incredibly pervasive nature. So with that being acknowledged, on the next slide, we will talk about our proposed solutions for youth mental health being aimed more towards schools. There is a desire from our student peers that has been expressed over and over again in the youth council meetings and student council meetings and in other spaces for a more compassionate and empathetic teaching style. Academic stress from overbearing and demanding assignments is, in my view, the principal issue in schools that impacts youth mental well-being. To remedy this, students have advocated for staggering tests, essays, and other point-heavy assignments more throughout each semester, so as to lighten the workload and not make students' entire semester determined by a 1 or 2 week period of high-pressure work every January and June. Students have similarly advocated that we do away with the policy of marking perfectly acceptable assignments late for not being turned in on time during each given grading period and diminishing credit for that work. We know that it is important for students to exercise self-care and balance their personal, professional, and academic priorities. And nightly binding deadlines that threaten our grades make it impossible to balance these priorities, and they are mentally burdensome. Now, in the classroom, self-paced learning has become more and more popular since students have returned from online learning. Allowing us students to work at our own pace has been tremendously helpful in relieving stress and helping students cope with their academic demands, inevitably leading to more positive mental health outcomes. And on the next slide, we talk more about meaningful ways to address these issues outside of the school system. In our view, one of the biggest root causes of mental health struggles is not having anyone to talk to. These feelings that we talk about of isolation, loneliness, or a lack of connectivity are real and are felt amongst our peers. Students who seek professional counseling often find that they have nowhere to turn to, and that what limited options that are available for counseling often are not adequate or meet the full needs of students. Students want reliable, affordable, professional counseling services that are available to them, and often they're not finding that in the city. In that same interest of keeping youth connected, students have sought more events and gathering spaces to breathe, that is, to socialize and to learn. An example would be the 2022 Youth Summit, where students this May will have the opportunity to go out with their friends and make new ones at a school district-wide event. These events, like the Youth Summit, also give organizers the chance to teach more productive ways to deal with stress and teach self-care, which can also lead to better mental health outcomes. I say to the council that at the end of the day, we are kids, and after the past 2 years, we want to go out and have fun and see each other. We want friends and relationships and jobs, and principally, we want something to do with ourselves. We want to be understood, we want to be accommodated, and we want to be connected with each other. And we believe that that is the best way to tackle youth mental health as an issue. So that concludes my presentation on youth mental health in the city of Lakewood, and I would like to field any questions. And although I absolutely do not mind being put on the spot, Councilman Brandstetter was kind enough to email me this morning with a few follow-up questions that I discussed with the youth council team at our meeting earlier this evening that I would like to address. Councilman Brandstetter, the first question was asking for clarification on where I said that students feel that they have little opportunity to voice their opinions. And in response, I would say that it has been our experience in school that rarely is our advice solicited, especially when it comes to things like mental health. And we feel that even more rarely is our advice heeded and transformed into policy changes. I said in my presentation that our community leaders have the ability to make a profound impact on students' well-being, for better or for worse. And Councilman, you asked me to provide more context to that claim, as well as assess how our leaders could make more of a positive influence. In response to that, a member of our youth council spoke of her high school wrestling coach and how his openness to listening to students and their needs with empathy has made her team a safe space that the athletes can enjoy. I think our leaders have a social responsibility to listen to youth with empathy and honesty that will make students feel safe and secure. Another question asked about actionable specifics that the council should consider. I'm going to turn this question around to the youth council at our last meeting. They asked that you do what you aim to do already, which is be a sounding board for our priorities. There are resources that are out there for students, but many are not well known. As an example, one of our members pointed out today that in schools like mine, it seems like every single week we have visits from colleges and universities, the police and fire departments, and just about every branch of the military, but no visits from mental health educators or professional and licensed therapists. So I ask you, how can we collaborate to make resources more known and accessible to students? And if there are not resources, how can we provide more? How can we make professional mental well-being support available to our students? How can we make it affordable to all young Lakewoodians and their families? How can we put together more events and opportunities for students to interact? How can we make school a manageable experience? These are the questions that we want to answer with your help. So I hope those are good answers. And again, I would love to answer any other questions.
Mr. Jones, thank you very much. There are
Thank you.
probably plenty of questions here, and maybe I'll start the conversation with the Youth Summit. I understand that this will be a topic or a significant topic of interest for discussion at the Youth Summit.
Absolutely, it will be.
And so I would throw it back and offer our willingness to participate in any meaningful way for your group at the Youth Summit. And we can check with our city manager and our behavioral health contact team and whether they can be made available to be there to provide some feedback on what they do in their role in the city, and perhaps how we can utilize their services, perhaps even more broadly.
I appreciate that, sir.
Absolutely. Councilmember Bell has some questions. I'm sure Deputy Mayor Moss, and I'll have a few follow-ups too, but thank you.
I just wanted to say thank you so much for the presentation. It was great to hear everything, and I think that all of this is super relevant. And I wanted to make a comment. What Mayor Whalen said is, yes, how could we help with the youth summit? What is needed there? I am available, and I think the rest of the council will be too. So I'd love to hear what comes out of that too, possibly even a report after the youth summit, which I think is going to happen anyways.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And I would say that the planning for the youth summit, I'm having meetings with Shannon Bennett every Thursday, and she's kind of masterminded the whole thing. And our like focal point of interest is how can we make sure that student mental health is a priority? How can we make sure that students are really being listened to at that event? And I think the best role that the council can play is just by being there, because we're going to have students from all over the district, and we're making sure that transportation isn't a barrier, that socioeconomic status isn't a barrier. We're going to have a very diverse group. And so I think students would love to hear from you. And similarly, I'm sure you would love to hear from them. And using what they have to say to guide you in making actionable policies moving forward.
Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You know, Hank, I've heard your presentation before and I enjoyed it quite a bit. You do a thorough job. Have the question of the visitors been expressed to your leaders at the school? Like you wanted the mental health of someone from that category to be visitors. Have that question gone forward to the staff?
I don't believe it has, no. We were kind of, at our 5 o'clock meeting, our 4 o'clock meeting, we were kind of just brainstorming more information that we could put into this presentation, and brainstorming more ideas for mental health counselors to be accessible to students at our schools. And it was pointed out by, I think, Adriana on the Youth Council. She had said, why do we have so many people from so many different industries coming to our school, but not counselors? So I think when we come back from spring break, I'll definitely try to approach our administrative team and ask them about that. I think we also just don't know if there are any organizations that would be available to come fill that slot, that would be available to come to our school. And I think that really goes back to that issue where, like we know there are resources out there, but we don't know what they are. I think that's really common with our students.
I think if you get that message to Mr. Banner, that
Mr.
can
Banner.
happen. I think it'd be a good place to start.
Absolutely. Okay, Mr. Banner,
Thank you.
Yeah,
on my
that-
list.
That was a follow-up question I had too for you, Mr. Jones. One of the,
Okay.
Obviously we're two separate boards, the school board and city council, but we try to do things collaboratively as best we can. One of the things we often hear from the school district and the school board is their emphasis on student voice.
Yeah.
And what I hear from you is perhaps it isn't working to the fullest extent that the students would like it to
I
work.
think that'd be fair to say. Yeah.
And do you have in each of your high schools a decent sort of student government council that does some of the gestation of these issues to be able to communicate with district leadership or with at least the school leadership to elevate some of these concerns? I'm just trying to get an understanding of
Right.
how well the focus on student voice is working for the students.
Yeah, absolutely. I think at least in appearances, there's definitely an effort that's made. We have a student council that's very strong at my school at Harrison Prep. And as far as I know, Clover Park and Lakes have similar student council structures. We also have the Superintendent's Youth Advisory Council, which meets with Mr. Banner and Mr. Twyman from the Clover Park School District about once a month. And we give the administration advice on the stuff we're talking about right now. I think the concern really is that we're not really seeing much coming out of it. And I know that progress is slow and it takes time, and the people we're talking to have very busy jobs, right? But I think progress is too slow for an issue this urgent.
Understood. And for the Youth Council Summit, I'm just thinking out loud here. One of the reasons that the county and the public passed the 0.1% for behavioral health funding was to provide additional resources for behavioral health counseling. And one of the big voices for that tax, frankly, was the school district, indicating a need for additional counselors within the district and the need to have funding to be able to hire those folks. So I'm going to follow up for you to find out where we are with that progress, because I know we passed the tax as a community and Lakewood deferred to the county to be able to pass that tax because we knew that it would have more regional impact as opposed to cities doing it. It's better to have it with the county. And I'm hopeful that we can get some feedback from the county on how those funds are being distributed so we can communicate back to you with some specificity what is being done with regard to student mental health issues, because that was one of the reasons, at least we were sold, to support the tax. And it needs to, in my opinion, happen because there's obviously a need. So maybe Mr. Caulfield can help us with getting that data before the May summit for sure, and then we can make sure you have it to be able to prompt some discussion on that issue.
I appreciate that, Mr. Mayor.
Absolutely. Anything else, Mr. Brandstetter?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Jones. I do appreciate the time you spent both preparing to present to us and the insights that you've provided. I think two things that I'm coming away from this evening with is that the question of student voice being heard is to some extent a combination of student voices not being loud.
Yeah.
On the other hand, you're not getting some feedback that the student understands that they've actually have been heard. But that you can say something and then there's no feedback or response in any regard to be able to go and do that. And I think that we can work on that as young people make asks, make recommendations, that at least some feedback is in a timely way that comes back to them to be able to go and do that as the mayor has committed us to do with talking with our colleagues on the school board to do that and not wait a month to do that, to go on. So I think that if we can do something in that regard, in the short term, I'm hopeful that we'll be able to help. The other thing is that you've made quite a few comments about needing professional counselors who are available to youth to do that. But I guess my question is, to some, a professional counselor is a person who's got a piece of paper that says, I took a class and I'm a counselor. That doesn't necessarily mean that that's a person that folks from your generation can respond to. I think that there's some idea about when we went through this as a city and our police chief went through working to staff our mental health contact team, that he had more attributes of that person he was looking for in mind than that they have a certain academic piece of paper. Some attributes about who could work with the population that was being envisioned that team serving primarily, which were folks in mental health crisis who were coming in contact with the police. So if you and your colleagues on the youth council would be helpful to provide not only to the school board, but to us a little bit more in terms of what are the attributes of a counselor that would actually connect and be welcomed by folks of your generation. That would help us find the right professional counselors. But hopefully together, we're on the right track.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Mr.
Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr.
Absolutely.
Branstetter. I'll address the first part of that comment first. It seems like many students feel that their voices are not being heard by the administration. And I'm talking about in schools. And then when they are heard, then there's a concern that they aren't being listened to. And so what we're really concerned about is making sure that our words penetrate and that they're really felt, they're taken to heart, and that something comes out of it. And we're not seeing a lot of that. And so, you know, I'm giving this same presentation to the ALT, which is a lot of administration officials for the Cloverbrook School District after spring break concludes. And I hope that more administrative bodies are able to listen to what young people have to say, not just me, but other young people. And they're able to make a lot of meaningful action out of that. So, and then the second part, yeah, a counselor can have narrow or wide definitions. I think one of the biggest issues that I talked about in the presentation is feelings of isolation or loneliness or a lack of someone to talk to. And someone to talk to can be a licensed professional therapist. I mean, I have one, he works great. It could also be like a high school wrestling coach, right? It needs to be someone that needs to be a trusted adult that our students can talk to, or a mentor. And I feel like a lot of kids don't have that. I think it's so essential that we all have someone like that in our lives. So yeah, I think we should try to find more people that can fit within that criteria.
Agreed. You know, being the father of a 16-year-old who's come home from school with, you know, challenges from friends who seek a listening ear, and, you know, kids aren't licensed to do it. They do the best they can with their peers, but it takes that caring adult that's skilled, I think, that really needs to step in. So thoughts well taken.
Okay, thank you,
Yeah,
sir.
thank you for coming, and I appreciate it.
Thank you for your time.
Okay, next on the agenda actually is the Clover Park School District report, which will be presented via written comments tonight. I believe we have received written comments already. Is that correct, Ms. Schumacher?
Mayor, that is correct. Board Member Anderson provided written comments in advance of this meeting. He is unavailable.
Thank you. Okay. And I'll wait till you get back to your seat because we have to do our raise the hand feature. We now turn to the public comment section of tonight's meeting. Public comments are accepted by mail, email, or by live, in person, or virtual comment. Comments may be submitted in advance by mail or email to Ms. Schumacher, City Clerk, at 6000 Main Street Southwest here in Lakewood, or to her email address, bschumacher@cityoflakewood.us. Comments received up to an hour before the meeting have been provided to the City Council electronically, and the clerk will read the names of those who have submitted comments in advance. I might note here that if anyone, and we often do, if anyone has comments that are lengthier in nature than the typical 3-minute public comment might entail, they're certainly invited to provide written public comment, because sometimes that provides more in-depth comment for us. So at this time, can you read the names of those who have submitted written comment in advance?
Mayor Whalen, we received no written comments in advance of this evening's meeting.
Okay. Pursuant to our City Council Resolution 2021-12, our rules of procedure, members of the audience may comment on items relating to any matter related to city business under this public comment period. Each person should give his or her name and city of residence, and please limit the comments to 3 minutes each. Again, lengthier comments can always be submitted in writing to the clerk. If you'd like to provide a live virtual public comment, you will need to join the Zoom meeting as an attendee by the telephone number and the meeting ID number that is appearing on the screen. Press *9 to use the raise your hand feature. So I will now call on those who have first signed in to speak today here in person, and then we'll go to those who have raised their virtual hand. And we change back and forth each week, and we provide the folks in person first dibs, and then the people on Zoom second dibs, and then we reverse that order to give everyone a fair shot. So tonight we have Carrie Hills, first person who's signed in to address the council during this public comment meeting. Mr. Hills.
Hello, my name is Kerry Hills. I'm a lifetime resident here of Lakewood. I initially came to speak on parks, but after hearing your youth council speak, I just wanted to provide a little bit of information. I worked 20 years in community mental health with Greater Lakes Mental Health. So there is a mental health agency here in Lakewood that is able to provide services to the youth. I know Clover Park School District contracts with Greater Lakes Mental Health to provide services in their schools. There are also other agencies in the community that if Greater Lakes or Multi-Care, which Greater Lakes has been bought out by, can't provide service. There is a warm crisis line, which runs from, I think, 3 o'clock until 11 o'clock. It's open for anyone to call. And the number for that warm crisis line is 1-800-576-7764. It's not specifically for a crisis, but just somebody that wants to have somebody that they can talk to. And sometimes it's better if it's somebody that maybe isn't going to judge you. And if you don't know the other person on the other line, they're not going to judge you. But there's also a crisis line that you could call for more in-depth crisis or more severe crisis. And that number is 1-877-780-5222. And then a lot of youth don't like to talk on the phone. They like to spend their time texting. And so there's also a text line. And it's not a local text line, but it's 741-741. And so you can text about any concern or crisis that you may have. As a citizen, I guess I'm a little perplexed. I come not as much recently to Lakewood City Council meetings, but have also been attending board meetings for Clover Park Schools. And I hear Mr. Banner talk about the youth council that they have there to get input from the students. So it's concerning to hear that input isn't being well received from the perspective of the students. I would challenge each of you on the board, not maybe just Mayor Wellen to make some inquiries, but each of you to make some inquiries as to how the youth council here can maybe work more in touch with the school district, because it doesn't sound like the same youth council you have here is the same council he's getting input from the district. And I'm also perplexed that if we voted in, and I know it wasn't the citizens, but voted in through the county council, the 0.1% for mental health, that we don't know where that's going. And that's one reason I was a strong advocate against it, is because working in mental health, I saw that money wasn't always allocated as it was appropriated. And this maybe is just another concern. So if you guys can check into that, I'd appreciate it as a citizen. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hills. Next on the list on the sign-up sheet, Mr. James Dunlop.
My name is James Dunlop, and I'm a Lakewood resident. I'm commenting on the ad hoc tree committee and how it reflects the city of Lakewood's bad faith. Bad faith. Saying you're concerned about preserving Lakewood's unique environment, and through your actions, demonstrating the opposite. The tree committee was supposed to show that the city was listening, yet it has been a cynical deception right from the beginning. The former mayor presided over member selection. The selection process represented his middle finger to what he called the peanut gallery. He and his underlings aimed to create a pliant grouping, often with connections to city-promoted institutions, who were expected to go along with a choreographed affirmation of the status quo. Not surprisingly, candidates who were most passionate about saving Gary Oaks were excluded. And let's look at how the tree committee works. The city has paid tens of thousands of dollars to outside consultancies whose job is to support their client's agenda. And as we see, they rigidly control the committee's proceedings. Right now, no oral public comments are allowed, going against the Growth Management Act, which calls for early and continuous public participation. Even members of the committee have few opportunities to express themselves as they are led towards their destination like cattle. To illustrate this, Planet Geo, one of the consultancies manipulating the committee, contrasted Lakewood's 17,000 square feet exemption from tree preservation regulation with 3 other cities that have even worse regulations. This was cherry picking, designed to show Lakewood in a good light. It is like saying that Russia is a wonderful democracy and supporting this argument by comparing it with North Korea, Cuba, and Kazakhstan. You can therefore see that the ad hoc tree committee was a failure before it even started. It's obvious that the city is using outside consultancies to manipulate a group of mainly non-experts into supporting the status quo. And as the committee has little credibility, the city must accept their own failure and start taking the issue of tree preservation seriously. And please, stop the duplicity, stop the bad faith.
Thank you. Next, we have Christina Minetti.
Hello, my name is Christina Minetti and I live in Lakewood. First, I'd like to make sure that everybody knows that 56 Gary Oaks were cut down last week at the former Oakwood School. Since no city council liaison has attended any of the ad hoc tree committee meetings up to this point, as probably should have, I thought I'd update you on what's been happening. Although I had high hopes for the ad hoc tree committee, as you can imagine, this hope has been fading with each passing meeting. It is clear that the ad hoc tree committee and the amendment process have been constructed in such a way as to allow the city to predefine the scope of amendments to suit its own purposes. The meetings are run so that the consultants present the members of the committee with curiously filtered information. The members have had virtually no opportunity to discuss the issues presented to it and are being steered towards a vision of happy tree planters covering vast barren expanses of Lakewood's poorest neighborhoods with saplings. In reality, the committee was originally tasked with amending Lakewood's profoundly flawed tree preservation code. It was not asked to contemplate the benefits of tree planting, which are clear, but secondary and a distraction as far as code amendments are concerned. Canopy expansion does not fall under the category tree preservation. The main objective for concerned citizens has clearly been to protect Lakewood's trees, especially the Gary Oaks, but not only, which are being cut down virtually unprotected. Because the City Council has declined to impose a moratorium, which would have been the sensible thing to do considering the circumstances, this tree cutting continues even as work is supposedly underway on the amendments. The Burke consultants and their subcontractors, Planet Geo, have plied the committee with slide after colorful slide of figures about tree canopy. And although now we are at the halfway point, the committee has not even grappled with the actual code yet. How can they possibly sort out all the many problems with the tree preservation code in just the 3 weeks that remain? One committee member did not even bother to show up for the first 2 meetings with no excuse and informing no one. Another one was visibly on Zoom driving around in his truck 2 times ago during the meeting, and the last time cleverly left his camera off for roll call before disappearing altogether from Zoom for the rest of the meeting. At least one other seems to have conveniently disappeared as well. This is not the kind of tree preservation amendment committee I'd been looking forward to. Instead of consultants in the pay of the city and various committee members who clearly have other things they would rather be doing, I would like to request that you start fresh with a committee comprised of those who truly care about tree preservation and experts to help them actually revise the tree preservation code in a conscientious and informed way. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next on the list is Anansi Malafar.
How you doing? I'm originally not really a Lakewood resident. I spent my last 30 years in South Carolina. I've only been here about 2 years. And in this 2 years that I've noticed, my specialty is exposing bad police officers. And I'm known internationally for what I do. See, I've gotten more than 100 cops fired. I've shut down 4 police departments and I've caused 4 riots. And what I've noticed about police officers in Washington State, but in particular Lakewood, because of all the minorities here, your cops target minorities. You wanna know how I know? Because I average more than 1 million views a month, partially because of your pigs. That's why. Mike Wiley, people like Mike Wiley, and it's just a never-ending cycle of police officers who do a lot of things that they think is actually hidden. I want to tell you, you got a problem with police gangs in this state. It's not just LA, it's also here. See, there's a lot of cops here at your Lakewood substation who have certain tattoos, who have certain behaviors that I actually picked up on. So within the next 2 months, I'm going to be releasing a full-length video about all the police gangs right here in Lakewood. And the other thing that I want to point out about Lakewood is do me a favor and stop calling it Chocolate City. You only have 12% Black people here. I come from a state of South Carolina where it's almost 50% Black people. You don't have a chocolate city here. You have people here who have to see 2 more Black people at a 7-Eleven, and then all of a sudden you call that a chocolate city. It doesn't work that way. Aside from that, I noticed that this young man here, and I want to thank you for what you set up here about mental health with the youth. Did you know that one of the contributing problems with mental health with Black youth is police officers? As according to National Institute of Health and also Johns Hopkins University, I did a deep dive on that recently on TikTok, and it got about, I think I want to say about 347,000 views, but whatever. What that points out to is that if you truly call this a chocolate city, if you got so much Black youth within the city, and yet they keep coming to me and telling me about how the police here are harassing them repeatedly, nonstop. Well, as a soldier, as somebody who spent 4.5 years in combat, that pisses me off. And I'm not going to ask you to stop. I'm going to tell you now, stop it. Because the next time that I actually hear that, I'm going to respond. Okay? Take that however you will.
For the record, sir, there's no one in the city that calls any portion of this city Chocolate City. It's just not appropriate, and we don't do it. Next, Mr. Otto Aquitas.
My name's Ado Equitas. I'm the chairman of the Panther Party. Been a little while since I've gotten to speak to you guys. Let's start in order. Fair Housing Act. That's cool. 58.9% white, 12.8% African American, 1.4% American Indian, 8.6% Asian, 2.6% Native Hawaiian, 16.9% Hispanic. It doesn't sound very fair to me. You guys might want to work on that. As far as the schools go, I'm not going to go any deeper. He said the numbers. Great speech, brother. Very well done. Very well done. He said it himself. Suicide rates are up. They feel like nobody's listening, and they don't know where to reach out. I hope that you guys give them those outlets. Look us up. We're always here for you. Real talk. Because if you guys aren't going to be there for them, we will, because we're here for the people. That's the people. So what they said with the ad hoc committee. When the ad hoc committee was first announced, we said that it was going to be a failure, and everybody came out and said, you know, it's harsh to presume failure when it comes to these things. We let our presumptions run on history, and the history showed what was most likely to happen. And it happened. The city stepped in, they controlled the narrative, and off they go. So we presumed failure, and it failed. With the Saeed Joaquin case, we were told, let the system work. Let Mary Robnett do her job. Okay. Mary Robnett put out her decision and everybody was right on board with it. Great. But Mary Robnett's biases have already been proven. Leonard Thomas died for no reason. Manny Ellis died for no reason. She said that Manny Ellis died and cool, ready to go. It wasn't until Bob Ferguson stepped in and said, nah, that ain't right, that all of a sudden Manny got a case. You guys had the opportunity to step up and you failed. All power to the people.
That was the last individual signed up to address the council, at least on the sign-in sheet during this public comment period. Are there any other members of the audience present tonight that would like to address the council during the public comment period? Sure, if so, feel free to step up, you bet. Just remember to give us your name and residence.
Oh, thank you. I'm Tracy Harrell, and I don't know if I'm supposed to be here and saying this. After listening, I called and I think I'm supposed to be here. I'm not sure though, after hearing everything that just happened. Greetings, Mayor Whalen, elected council and Lakewood citizens. I'm Tracy Harrell, owner of Easy Weddings and Events located on Nisqually tribal territory, also known as Ponders Corner in Lakewood on Pacific Highway. We are grateful to join our neighbors and fellow business owners in the revitalization efforts that are going on over there in Ponders. The city's successful efforts put forth in the comprehensive plan to build a strong customer service culture in Ponders is evident in a renewed sense of pride and commitment with the business owners and developers in that area right now. They're safe. It's a lot safer for people to walk about. The restaurants are busier. The criminal activity is down. There's new businesses that are being established in that area. And what I'm looking for is more art. So I have talked with Ricky Loves Painting, and he put something in Lincoln City, I believe, is the area. Lake City. Yeah, he put a love mural there. And we want to do a nod to our local soldiers, past and present, and he wants to put the word valor on the wall, on my wall of my building. And that wall is the south side wall in I-5. When you're on I-5, you can see that. So it would be a tribute to them. And I'm asking if the city would partner in funding or volunteers to help that beautification process. So I'm not sure if this is the place to do that, but that's what I'm doing. And I thank you so much for your revitalization efforts there. We just want to bring more visitors, more tourists, and kind of make that like a new Las Vegas Strip area. But, you know, cool like that. Kind of like along with South Kilma Way. So that's all I'm saying.
Well, thank you for coming. We will let the Arts Commission folks know of the request because a lot of the public art participation monies and opportunities flow through the Arts Commission, and Mary Dodsworth behind you is our city Parks and Rec director, and she can get you some information on that.
I've met Mary.
Thank you. Are there any other members of the audience who wish to address the council during this public comment period? If not, we will now switch over to the virtual members of the audience who wish to address the council during the public comment period. And it looks like we have 6 individuals. Mr. Haugen is the first individual signed in. Mr. Haugen.
Can you hear me?
I can. Thank you.
Dennis Haugen, Sioux Falls, South Dakota. Over the last, this meeting and several of the last one, I've heard individuals ranting and raving about property rights. Property rights are in the Constitution. It's also the job of government to protect people's property rights as well as their individual safety. And the only thing I can conclude from the ranting and raving that I've heard is that education is the problem. We have people that just haven't read the Constitution. They probably never heard of it. And of course, this will keep on. This isn't going to stop. But the worst thing you can do is give in, because it's your duty to follow the Constitution of the state and the nation. But that lack of education points to a problem with public education in general and across the country. Here are all kinds of really dumb things lately. Like some PhD came up with the idea that math is racist. You know, and Yale law school students were ranting about free speech. Well, power, isn't that what they say? Power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. There's going to have to be a reform across the nation on the education. And probably the best way to do that is put more competition in there, break up a lot of the bigger operations. But at any rate, it's going to be a hard 2 years for you for the next couple of years. You know, when the Trump policies were all canceled, you're going to have your sanctuary state, you're going to have drugs coming in, more crime, more problems. And I wouldn't be surprised if many of you may have been incapacitated by drug usage, because it's really getting sneaky. People putting, China helping make mixtures and whatnot. But, elections have consequences. Unfortunately, you've got to wait a couple of years before you can do some drastic changes. Thank you.
Thank you. Next on the list for virtual public comment is Ms. Christy Jennings.
Hello. I am actually on my mom's phone right now, so I'm Pepper Lazowski. Hello, my name is Pepper Lazowski. I'm 12 years old. I live in Los Angeles, California. I'm returning to speak again at this meeting to talk about the Gary Oak trees. Already, many homes have been lost for the animals. Unlike the animals, we have shops, restaurants, homes, etc. We have so many more resources than the animals we share the world with. Animals have nature as their shops, restaurants, and houses, and specifically, they have trees. They have their twigs of nuts and fruit and blossoms as their shops, and their branches for houses and leaves for protection. Lately, with climate change, they have been getting less and less of these resources. And due to situations like the loss of our 56 Gary Oak trees, things certainly haven't been getting better. I think it's only fair for us to help the animals keep their little remaining resources. Losing these 56 beautiful trees recently was devastating, but we have to look forward and look at the trees we can still save. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Oviuno X.
Yes, hello, good evening. This is General Ovenal. I wanted to speak a little bit tonight about the Gary Oak trees as well. I still don't know why you wish to cut down an endangered tree. Makes no sense. And the young kid that just spoke exactly the facts. You guys have heard the facts 1,000 times. I ain't even gonna repeat. Secondly, you got a corrupt cop on your force, Mike Wiley, who enjoys pulling triggers on people. I don't know why you haven't addressed that either. And then, as the young man said, and that's actually my reason for coming tonight, the schools are just not doing their job like they should. And it's because, well, there's many factors. But for the young ethnic children, such as my son, they're being taught a false history. And y'all call it critical race theory. Since when is learning about our ancestors a theory? It is real history. And it pisses me off that y'all would hold them back from learning the truth about America with your corrupt, let me hold my tongue, because I get a little bit emotional about this topic, because it is absolute trash what y'all are doing. You ain't doing anything but worrying about money, getting money, bringing in more people to bring in more money, building warehouses on land. You tore down a middle school where kids go to learn for a Amazon warehouse. That is trash. Shame on you, Lakewood. I ain't got nothing else to say. All power to the people. Say Joaquin.
Next on the list is Mr. Bunchy Carter.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I apologize for the background noise. I'm actually out enjoying dinner right now, but I felt it was necessary to join this meeting tonight. Now, I know that y'all are accustomed to me coming at y'all about Saeed Joaquin. That's not going to happen tonight. Because, see, at this juncture, it's past you. And I said that before. It's past you. It's even past Mary Robinette at this point. But just through researching her history and her decision-making, a lot of ties between officials, police officers that do somewhat official things on their off time. A lot of connections are coming into view. The problem that I have is not that these people are connected. Connection is part of human existence. The problem that I have is that these people are connected in order to construct a web to keep the people caught in a situation where we can't come up. Poverty is not just some situation that arises from people being lazy. I've never been lazy a day in my life, ever. Because I was taught as a young child that if I want something bad enough, I have to work hard for it. That's something that all kids should be getting taught. But unfortunately, what most kids are being taught is, hey, it's a new era. Technology's changed. All you gotta do is show up. All you gotta do is show up. Well, let me tell you who doesn't show up. The ad hoc committee for the trees, they don't show up. You know why? Because it's not about the trees. It's not about the community. It's not about the people. It's about the bottom line. You know who else didn't show up? And I'm highly disappointed in this gentleman after all the conversations we've had. Chief Mike Zaro. I read his report about crime in Lakewood. And from my own observations and from us being out on the streets and talking to the people, I vehemently disagree with many things inside that report. It wasn't the law that made it impossible for cops to do their job. It was the cops giving them an excuse, giving themselves an excuse not to do their jobs so that they could change the law. Anybody who's had a license to kill with impunity would never want that to be taken away. What kind of sense would that make? What's in the best interest of the people is not in the best interest of the city, so it seems. But the city don't exist without people. So I would ask you to do a deep dive into the reason you're in that seat you're in. all of you. And remember who put you there. And then think about what you really need to do in order to return power to the people who are supposed to have it. The government works for the people, not the other way around. That's always been the case. At least that's what the Constitution says is supposed to happen. That's what the Bill of Rights says is supposed to happen. But if the government is not doing what it's supposed to do, we have the right to tear it to the ground. All power to the people. Justice for Saeed Joaquin.
Next, we have Jenna Lee.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello?
Hello.
Hi, my name is Jenna Lee. I'm a resident of Seattle. I was a resident of University Place, Washington for a number of years and visited Lakewood often. So last summer, I visited the site of Oakwood School with its dozens of Gary Oaks. The site was used as a park by the local community, many of whom are Korean. And for clarity, I am Korean myself. With little knowledge of English, the residents there had little knowledge of English overall. So I spoke to them in Korean and learned just how important the park was to them. When I told them that all the trees were going to be cut down to make way for a warehouse, they were all shocked. The park was the lungs of their community. That was their words, not mine. And it was unbelievable to them that it was suddenly going to be ripped away from them. Permission for the development had already been granted, and apparently the community had been properly informed. I'm sure a board had been set up and letters sent out to addresses close to Oakwood, but I wonder what language was used. Was it just English? And had the city made the effort to translate the information into Korean? And let's face it, even if the community had known what was going to happen, would they have done anything? Would they have been able to do anything? When I talked to the Koreans over in Oakwood, none of them were prepared to speak to the city council. They were afraid, and as a result, their voice wasn't heard. To translate, one woman told me, as Koreans, what are we supposed to do? How are we to go in front of the Americans and say, we do not want this? And that is the extent of disempowerment that a linguistic difference can impose on a community. So this raises the question of why the city didn't make a special effort to reach out to Oakwood residents and explain what was going on and how their voice might be heard. It would have helped if a council member actually lived near Oakwood, but as we know, warehouse development doesn't impact anyone elected to this council. You don't have your lives and property values destroyed by a stream of cement trucks. So I've now heard that the Gary Oaks have been cut down, and originally the city was going to allow them to be all cut down, but because Christina Monetti intervened, the city negotiated with the developer and many of the trees were saved. But if it weren't for Christina, they would have all been gone. And this is not the responsibility of a private citizen to protect the community. The city should be looking out for its citizens, particularly its minorities who are more marginalized. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Lakencia Immortalis. All right.
Lakencia Immortalis, if you'd like to provide comments, please unmute yourself.
Sorry, I didn't realize I was muted. Can you hear me now?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. So my name is Lakencia Immortalis, and I am the Minister of Finance of the Panther Party and reside here in Lakewood. I read the investigative report on the killing of Saeed Joaquin, and a few critical details were left out. The facts presented do not make sense. Mike Wiley says that Saeed lunged for the gun on the floor of the car with both hands. The autopsy report states that the gunshot wound was consistent with Saeed having his left arm up. because he was shot in his side. The other officer at the scene was heard saying, "I can't see the gun. Where is it?" Saeed lowered his hand to point to the gun, which is when Mike Wiley shot him. If Saeed had reached for a holstered gun on the floor with one hand still up, Wiley would have known that it was not a life-threatening event. It was not an event to kill someone over. Mike Wiley is a weapons expert trainer. He should have known this. Saeed would have had to grab the gun and unholster it with one hand. How could someone unholster a gun with one hand while leaving his left arm up? Wiley told Saeed before he shot him that he was going to get shot, which is exactly what happened. Mike Wiley shot him. Make that make sense to us. Mike Wiley created his own narrative that does not match the statements made by the officer or the passenger that was present in the vehicle. Mary Robnett left all of that out of the investigative report. She made her decision based solely on Mike Wiley's statement. How is that justice? We demand that this case be reopened and investigated by a group outside of Pierce County and from an entity that is not connected to law enforcement. I hope that you, Mayor Whalen, will take action that the City Council has failed to do thus far. Justice for Saeed Joaquin, all power to the people.
Thank you. That is it for the individuals who have signed up to address council during the public comment period, both in person and online. Are there any other members out there in Zoom who wish to address the council during the public comment period? Seeing none, I'll declare the public comment period closed. We now turn to the consent agenda. Madam Clerk.
A, approval of the minutes of the City Council retreat of March 12th, 2022. B, approval of the minutes of the City Council study session of March 14th, 2022. C, approval of claims vouchers in the amount of $2,514,591.78 for the period of February 17th, 2022 through March 17th, 2022. D, approval of payroll checks in the amount of $2,577,419.64 for the period of February 16th, 2022 through March 15th, 2022. E, motion number 2022-24, authorizing the execution of a collective bargaining agreement between the City of Lakewood and the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees, AFSCME Local 1938, for the period of January 1, 2022 through December 31, 2023. F, motion number 2022-25, appointing Mark Hayes to serve on the Landmarks and Heritage Advisory Board through December 31, 2024. G, items filed in the office of the City Clerk. 1, Joint Landmarks and Heritage Advisory Board and Parks and Recreation Advisory Board meeting minutes of February 22nd, 2022.
Thank you very much. Is there any item which any council member wishes to remove from the consent agenda at this time? If not, do I have a motion to adopt the consent agenda as presented?
So moved, Mr. Mayor.
It's been moved by Deputy Mayor Moss and seconded by Councilmember Brandstetter that we adopt the consent agenda as presented. Is there any further discussion? If not, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The consent agenda is adopted. We now move to the regular agenda. Resolution 2022-02, Madam Clerk.
Resolution number 2022-02, authorizing and improving participation in the Public Employees Retirement System, PERS.
Thank you very much. For this, we have our Human Resources Director, Mary McDougall, who will provide us with a PowerPoint overview.
Good evening, Mayor Whalen, Deputy Mayor Moss, and City Council members. I'm Mary McDougall, Human Resources Director, here to speak this evening about the resolution before you authorizing and approving participation in the state's Public Employees Retirement System for those employees in eligible positions.
First, a little bit of history about the City of Lakewood retirement plans. The incorporation of the city in 1996, the city opted to not participate in Social Security and PERS, and instead selected ICMARC, now Mission Square, to administer the replacement plans for both Social Security and PERS. When the police department formed in 2004, the commissioned officers were enrolled in the Social Security placement plan through ICMARC and the DRS LEF pension plan, the Department of Retirement Systems. So why is the city interested in joining PERS? It's a factor in our recruitment. So the city of Seattle, Tacoma, and Spokane all have their own retirement systems, but it's our understanding that we're the only city other than those three that's not currently in the state plan. So we have, and many other public jurisdictions as well are members of PERS. And so when we're recruiting people, many of our city positions require or desire public sector experience. And so we often have difficulty recruiting from those places that are already in PERS because people don't want to move to an organization that's not in PERS. In addition, AFSCME and Teamster bargaining units have support the move to PERS, and we have a significant number of employees in eligible positions that have PERS, that have other PERS or other DRS plan membership. So in terms of PERS eligible positions, so should the city move to join PERS, then the requirement is that all PERS, any position that is normally compensated for at least 70 hours or more per month for 5 or more months in a year is required to be in the PERS system then. So there's no individual choice. All employees in eligible positions would be required to join. And then current employees have the option to purchase previous service credit with the city of Lakewood. And it's on an all or none basis. And they would purchase both the member and the employer contributions for that time served. What about elected officials? So elected or governor appointed officials are eligible, but not required to be in the state retirement plan. Currently, Lakewood City Council does not participate in the PERS replacement plan, but would be eligible on an individual basis to be in the PERS, to be a member of PERS. In terms of our part-term judge, if the judge is appointed to a non-elected position and the position meets PERS eligibility requirements, they are mandated into PERS. So our part-time judge would be in the PERS system in that case. And then in terms of former employees, including retirees, employees who were in PERS eligible positions who retired who have left the city prior to the city joining PERS would be eligible to gain their PERS membership by purchasing, again, their previous service credit with the city of Lakewood within 5 years of the city joining PERS. In terms of a plan comparison, this is just going to be a really high level overview. It's easy to get very quickly into the weeds of the specifics of things. So this is just very high level. So in the PERS replacement plan, it's a defined contribution plan. All vested contributions and investment earnings are available for use by the employee in retirement. There's a 5-year vesting for employer contributions of 20% per year, and employees are eligible to retire at age 55. In the PERS 2 plan, that's a defined benefit plan, and the monthly benefit is based on both their earned service credit and compensation while a member of PERS 2. There's a 5-year vesting for employer contributions. It's just after 5 years called cliff vesting. And then employees are eligible to retire with full benefit at age 65 if they have at least 5 years of service credit. And I just wanted to note that new members can select Plan 2 or Plan 3, which is a hybrid plan with both defined benefit and defined contribution benefits. So there are 2 options there. To compare rates, the chart shows that for our current ICMA PERS replacement plan, members pay 5.08% of salary, and the city contribution is 7.62%. Current PERS member rate is 6.36, and the city's is 10.25. However, in the biennium of 2025 to 2027, the rates are projected to drop for both the member and the city to 4.92%. We looked at the rates going back to the city's incorporation, and those have ranged for that period from 0.65 to 7.9% for members and 1.32% to 11.18% for
for the city, but the average over that same period of time since the city's incorporation is 4.43% for members and 6.69% for cities. So that over time, that represents that city would have paid less being a member of PERS than in the PERS replacement plan. Currently, the rates are a little higher, however. So for 2022, the 6-month period, the increased cost to move to PERS this year would be $70,428 for members and approximately $144,706 for the city. So for next steps, the city council would adopt the resolution authorizing participation in PERS effective July 1, 2022, providing for tax deferred member contributions and providing that the member, again, would pay all previous service credit costs on both member and employer contributions, which is optional for the employee, but if they do decide it's all or none, and they would have a 5-year period to do that. The city would go ahead and complete the required forms and documentation for PERS, go through some employer reporting application training that they provide, complete and submit verification of earnings forms for employees who choose to purchase previous service credit, and then establish a timeline for winding down our PERS replacement plan. And employees are able to use their account balances from the PERS replacement plan to purchase their previous service credit if they desire. The remaining dollars can be rolled into another qualified plan, including the Social Security replacement plan, which will still be in place. And just there may be tax and penalty implications if there were cash outs of that money at that time. So that concludes the presentation I have, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ms. McDougall. Mr. Branstetter.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Ms. McDougall. I had some questions on the slide that talked about PERS eligible positions. So this indicates that elected officials currently do not participate in the PERS replacement plan. So we only participate in the Social Security replacement plan. And while you didn't specifically mention it, that Social Security replacement plan isn't going away for anyone.
Correct.
So all of our employees who would move to PERS from the PERS replacement plan will still be in the Social Security replacement plan. And is that still going to be administered by the same organization that they changed their name? So
Yes, at this point, we don't have any plans to move that from ICM. What was ICMARC is now Mission Square.
okay, so that will still exist
That's correct.
to be able to go through and do that. With respect to Judge Mansfield, and we're the only city in the state outside of the three you mentioned that uses the PERS replacement plan. Is she currently in some sort of a hybrid situation where Silicon and DuPont have her in PERS and we do not?
No, she is considered an employee of the city of Lakewood, and she is in our benefit system.
So when we make this change, that her entire salary, even though she's essentially a full-time person when you count all three cities, her entire salary and city contribution and her contribution, she would go in, and then we get reimbursed for the city's contribution for her in PERS from those other two?
So, she is a part-time judge, but the city of Lakewood contribution does still make her eligible for, she meets the criteria for a PERS eligibility requirement even under the city of Lakewood contribution. The city still pays the benefits and gets, I believe, the other cities pay their portion to the city of Lakewood.
Okay. And then in the comment around former employees, including retirees, they're eligible in their unique situations to essentially go back into PERS and purchase participation to be able to go and do that. Your comment says the city has no obligation to notify former employers of the city's decision to join PERS, and I assume that's a Scrivener's error and meant employees.
Yes, I apologize.
Okay. So while we have no obligation, why would we choose not to?
First of all, well, I mean, we don't, I'm not sure that we have up-to-date all information from all our former employees. You know, some of them have been gone for many years. We're not required to keep records on them past 6 years, past employment. So we just don't have that. We don't have those records to contact them and let them know. Not all of them anyway.
Well, yeah, and I guess to me, it seems all we'd have to do is tell them we've made the system and you are eligible, and you give them some sort of place to get some information about where they can get some information to make a decision if they want. So, we and if a former employee chose to want to do this, then we'd have to research the necessary input to be able to allow them to do that.
Yes, for any former employee who comes and requests that they have the opportunity, then we have to, that's correct, we have to provide PERS with information about their history here so they know how much they would owe for previous service credit.
And then I had one more question somewhere. Let me think. Well, under elected officials, there's a reference to you have to make 90 times the state minimum wage each month. You know what that calculate for 2022? What does that calculate out to?
Well, I don't have the exact number, but the state minimum wage is $14.49 per hour right now, and 90 times that is less than $1,400, which is the minimum, which is what our council members make per month.
But for some of my colleagues who might want to look at doing that, they'd go back to the time when we were making $500 a month. Back when it says sometime. So you can only purchase credit, an elected official could only purchase credit back through the years where they were making 90 times whatever the then minimum wage was.
No, actually, so that piece is talking about in terms of earning service credit for the month. So in order to earn the service credit, you had to have been making that much. So there could possibly be times, I mean, the state minimum wage is lower, but there could possibly be months where there wasn't any service credit to be earned that month. That's correct.
Okay. Mr. Mayor, I guess that I would say that I think that there is well, we don't have to, it would seem to me to be the right thing to do to let folks that have retired from the city, or certainly former employees that have moved on into that have moved on to employment with another municipality or state agency of where there is PERS, to let them know that we're taking this action rather than leave it to them to, by whatever means, find out. So even though we don't have the obligation, would look to do that, and that, but I don't know if that requires, to say that we will do that, I don't believe that requires amending the resolution in front of us, but I think, I would certainly put my voice to a consensus of the council asking staff to make that effort where it can be accomplished.
I think we could probably do it by posting the decision on the website, city's website, as opposed to making more affirmative action to try to sleuth out employees over a 25-year city history, which could be problematic. And it would be my assumption that those who might have gone to other locations that do have PERS would be sleuthing this opportunity out to buy back time to enhance their own retirement. So I would assume that they would be pretty interested, but I can see putting it on the website, for instance. I don't know how else we would communicate that very effectively. Mr. Caulfield, do you have any other suggestions on that piece? Or is that likely appropriate?
And Mayor, we can take a look at some options, but certainly posting on the website so that people have access to it. But I would concur with Ms. McDougall. We've had so many employees over the years. We just don't simply have their records.
Right.
Because again, we only keep records for 6 years. Though I will say, Mayor, that the word is getting out that the city is
sure.
considering this.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah. Especially those folks who are still in the system or recently left employment that may have opportunities to buy back additional years of service.
Well, it's mostly people who are in the PERS system who now want to maybe come work for the city of Lakewood.
Absolutely. Very good. Well, point well taken. Mr. Brandstetter, any other questions of Ms. McDougall? Well, if not, thank you for all your work. My only question was on one of the slides. If you go forward a couple slides there. Next slide. So on this one, with regard to the Social Security, what do you call it, opt-out or replacement? Is that an additional amount that members currently pay that is not reflected on this slide?
Yes, this doesn't reflect the Social Security replacement plan at all. I don't have those figures in front of me right now.
But it doesn't change because they're going to pay that no
it
matter
doesn't
what.
change. Nothing will change about that.
Got it. Okay. And with regard to the final slide, I had a question. With regard to the completion of the VOE forms for employees, I assume that your office is going to get swamped with requests for assistance on that?
Yeah, so that'll be a joint effort with payroll who has those records. And so we won't be able to actually do anything until we join PERS in July. And because we need the records through the end of June to get their full employment history for people.
Right.
So they'll know how much they would need to pay to purchase that previous service credit. So yeah, we do anticipate having to prepare those, and we're working on a plan right now to figure out the timelines and how we'll approach that and make sure we get that done as soon as we can.
One thing that's not indicated here, can employees use the Social Security replacement monies in the ICMA account to buy back service credit time or not?
My understanding is they can use either what's in their PERS replacement plan or their money in their Social Security replacement plan to purchase that previous service credit.
Great. Okay. Well, thank you. If there are no further questions, do I have a motion to approve Resolution 2022-02?
So moved, Mr. Mayor.
Second.
It's been moved by Councilmember Brandstetter and seconded by Councilmember Bell that we approve and adopt Resolution 2022-02. Any further comments, questions, debate, discussion? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion to adopt Resolution 2022-02 has passed unanimously. Thank you. Mr. Caulfield, we now turn to unfinished business. Any?
There is none, Mayor.
Looks like we have no new business to attend to, so we turn to reports by the city manager.
That's correct, Mayor. And I'd like to call upon our Parks and Recreation Director, Mary Dodsworth, to provide you an update on two items. The first is a graffiti removal program that Ms. Dodsworth is looking to incorporate into our Adopt a Street program. And then secondly, to provide you an update on the city's naming policy that this body directed be sent to PREB. And so she's going to report back to you on what their recommendation is back to you. So with that, Mr. Osborne.
Good evening, Mayor and Deputy Mayor and council members. I'm excited to give you an update on our Adopt a Street program and then just highlight some of the things that we're going to be adding to it so that we can encourage more participation. You know, the city of Lakewood has such a huge volunteer base and heart for their community. And so this Adopt a Street program started when City Incorporated. And there's people out there that were doing it before the city became a city, and there's probably still people out there doing it on their own, but it became more of a formalized program when the city incorporated. We, Parks, Recreation, Community Services, took over the management of the program in 2016. And so at that point, we learned a lot about the program. It was, you know, we were handling volunteer activities in the parks and special projects in the park, but we hadn't really been aware of how the Adopt a Street program had been working. So we learned a lot about it. So the program itself, all of the supplies that we use for that, and I have examples over there, maybe you were able to see it before the meeting, but the pickers, the vests, the bags, things like that, it's provided with a grant that we received from Pierce County, and it's a Department of Ecology grant that they get, and they have brought us into, and maybe because it was happening before cityhood, but they've continued that program, and so we are able to be reimbursed for all of the supplies that we use within that grant. We have over 50 groups that participate. Some participate more than others, but most of them do it 3 to 4 times a year. Some do a little bit more, some do a little bit less, but again, it's sort of on average. And again, we provide all of the supplies to the group, and then we also provide the disposal. That's always a big deal. What are you going to do with all the stuff you collect? And so we do the disposal as well. And then once you've sort of proved that you're a worthy person and your groups come out a few times, we'll put a sign up, and you've seen those blue signs around. You can see that on their picture there. Our Full Tilt Riders, our motorcycle club, they, you know, we have a signs out around the community to honor those people that are helping keep our city clean. But we wanted to just show you some data. We do have data that goes back several years, but you can see from 2016 to 19, and 2019 was really one of our biggest years. We were really sort of starting to ramp up, making connections with our Make a Difference Day and our our Parks Appreciation Day, and trying to get more people involved with our outreach in the community. And you can see in 2019, we had, you know, you can see the drop from 2019 to 20 and 21. And that has a lot to do with the COVID. Same drop in our volunteer hours. You can see we are doing really, that was our biggest year in 2019. And you can see how it dropped for 2020 and 2021. And then again, the trash that's collected. So clearly some folks were still coming out, but a lot of our folks, you know, during COVID, people just, you know, weren't volunteering and they weren't gathering as groups. And even if groups were doing it, they were smaller. So we did see a drop in the program, but we're ready to pick that back up. So kind of the process that we follow, and I put a bunch of information in your packet, is that groups sign up, and usually there's an organizational leader. It's a church group, a service club, social group, and they sign up with the city. And so we're really, you know, safety is a big priority for us. We want to make sure that they have the right, you know, vests and hats and gloves and things like that to protect them, but also to protect, you know, so they're more visible when they're out on the road. So we get the groups to sign up. We provide training and videos and equipment and gear so that they are, you know, creating the safe environment. And then they come up to sit, they tell us when they're going to be out, because some of them do it on a regular basis. We provide these bins for them, and it's full of everything that you need, from the big sign to the hard hats and everything else. They pick up their supplies at City Hall because it's open on a regular basis and they can come and get them. They go out and do their litter removal. They typically leave all of the garbage on a corner that they let us know where it is, and then we pick it up the next day or that Monday if it's over a weekend. And then they return all their supplies to City Hall. We go through the bins, we restock them, make sure the forms are in there, the safety equipment's in there, and then, you know, it's just keeps going. So once we get them in, and then they report in the packets, you'll see there's a volunteer form. They sign in for safety, and then we know how many people were there, about how much garbage they picked up, and how many hours they served. We do have to report the volunteer hours to L&I on a quarterly basis as well. This is a map, which of course is hard to read in this perspective, and so I do have a blown up map there, but it does show you all those dots are places where we have groups that have adopted a street. So you can see when someone calls and they're interested in adopting, oftentimes if it's a church, it's near their church. If it's a family, it's near their home. If it's a business, it's near their business. And so we keep track of those so that we don't have people doubling up on a street. We try and spread the love as far as we can. So if the area that they're most interested in is already adopted, we work with them to find an area that they could do. We also make sure it's an area that's safe for a group to be out there. So there's a bit of a shoulder or a sidewalk or ways so that they're not standing out in the middle of the road. And then just coming, it says graffiti removal. It's really more graffiti coverage because, with our volunteers, they're not going to be using a lot of harsh chemicals and pressure washers out there on their weekends. But currently what happens is that, people report graffiti all the time. And so when it gets reported, if it's on public property, then it typically will come to our department, and then we figure out who's the best group to go out and take care of it. Once we've identified it, we do try and address it within 24 or 48 hours so that we can get rid of it as soon as possible. Also, our maintenance and operations staff, code enforcement, they're out and about all the time. And so they have equipment and supplies that can deal with small jobs as needed. Some of the jobs are quite large. We might get a call and it's the whole skate park or it's a whole restroom building. And so that might take a little more all hands on deck to deal with it, or bringing out a hot water pressure washer and things like that. But that's sort of the process now. If it goes into 311, you call, you email, or people use 311, it goes to our department if it's on public property. If it's on private property, it gets sent to CSRT, and CSRT deals with the private property and the business owners to respond. And we do have a city code that says that once they've been notified, they have about 7 days to deal with it. Code enforcement is really all about taking that step to help them just get it removed, right? Oh.
But those initial calls could come in My Lakewood 311 on private property, right? Someone
Correct.
could drive by and see them.
Oh,
and call them in.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay.
So when the address of the location of it is, then we figure out who it needs to go to. Sometimes it might go to, things go to the wrong person, and then we refer it to the right person. So, but anyway, code enforcement deals with typically individual private property and, businesses and things like that. And so they can write a ticket. Their goal is to just encourage them to get it taken care of. And some people do and some people don't. But generally, I think people, once they've identified it or they've been told there could be a fine, they work on it. I'll tell you that the Row Club at Harry Todd Park got tagged quite a bit this year. Mm-hmm. And, they're a nonprofit organization. Their building is private. It's their building. We'll get to it. But when we finally said, we're going to have to tell CSRT if you don't get it cleaned up. And once they got the word that, there could be a fine, they were on it right away, right? And that's typically what happens when people, once they see that we're serious about getting it taken care of. So one of the things, so here's what we're looking to do is that we want to start adding it. We figure the Adopt a Street program, we've got groups out there all through the community. Oftentimes they're doing it along an area where there might be graffiti on a pole, or it could be on the sidewalk, or it could be on a fence, that we want to give them materials to cover that up if they can while they're out there. If they're seeing that it's a job that's just too big for them, then we're encouraging them now to use 311 to take a picture of it. It goes right into the 311 system to notify us on our written reports that they provide, so that they can be responsive when they're out in the field. And if not, then we can follow up with them and take care of those things. One of the things that we're working with them, as well as just, helping teach people about graffiti and where it's at and how they can respond to it, and then how we can, again, back them up if it's a job. One of the things that we see graffiti on signs and we just want to wash it off. But if it's on a road sign, we have to be really careful about the reflectivity, which is a real word. And we monitor that actually several times a year, especially on our stop signs. And so if you use those, graffiti remover is a pretty chemical based thing. So that's why we're not handing out those buckets of chemicals to our citizens. So once you start wiping off signs like that, you do lose that reflectivity. So If it's a simple removal, we can, but otherwise, oftentimes we just replace the sign because then that way it meets our code from liability and safety. If there was ever a problem with an accident and someone was to check that sign and we hadn't, kept the right sign there, it could cause liability. So we're always looking after the city's best interest as well as our citizens that are out there. But we're really hoping that people start using the My Lakewood 311 again to provide tracking and identification because we can't be everywhere, right? So if that 311 is really a good instant conversation with our staff to take care of business. So what are we doing? We're because COVID, we're reinvigorating the program. We're partnering with past groups and current groups just to send them a note and saying, hey, we're still here. We hope you're still interested in participating. Who's your leader now? It's been several years since we've done that because sometimes leadership changes. Encouraging other groups to join in that might not even know that we do this and that they want to get out and help make the city a better place to live and play and get that first impression. And then again, on like Parks Appreciation Day and Make a Difference Day and our Community Cleanup Day, which is at the beginning of this month, is to we send notes out and said, hey, just so you know, it's Park Appreciation Day. It might not be your regular time that you do it, but it'd be a great time for you all to get together and go out and do cleanup. And again, it's just that bigger effort and that impact for our city. The other things that we've talked about doing is putting this information up at like our farmers market so we get a really good representation of our citizens, again, that might not know this is even something that they could do. Also at things like Summerfest, just ways of, getting this information out to folks so that they can participate. And then we've also talked about getting some donated prizes and incentives just to give people a little something, go have a cup of coffee when you're done doing your thing. And there's businesses in the community that want to support us. So again, all those things would be donated. It wouldn't be city funds. So those are ways that we're working on the program. And if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. I just give you a couple pictures here of some of our friends that are out there doing the work. It really is very diverse. It's service clubs, it's families, it's church groups, and just people out there.
I had a question on the map real quick.
Uh-huh.
I'll open it up. So if you go back a couple,
Sure.
it looks like many of the streets have been quote unquote adopted, right?
Quite a few. Mhm.
So the question is, what if the adopted street is not well attended? Do you call CPS to?
No, we do monitor. We have probably not in the last 2 years, but if you aren't taking care of you're not turning your materials in, we haven't seen any participation, we may make contact with you to say, hey, did you guys do a cleanup, but we didn't get your paperwork because we track it that way. Or if they're just not responsive anymore, then we pull their sign. Because that's the other thing too, is that that's something else that we've monitored too. Yeah. In the old days, just filling out your form, you would get a sign. And I said, I want to see some work first before we're going to invest in signs. So.
Great. Mr. Branstetter?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Mr. Osworth. With respect to participation, when the group signed the agreement, the minimum participation specified in the agreement is quarterly?
We encourage people to do it 4 times a year. Mm-hmm.
Okay. And I'm just trying to connect the Adopt a Street program with adding the graffiti piece to it. So, and I'll just use the example of the Lions Club is adopted 75th Street, a segment. When we would incorporate graffiti removal, it would be for that adopted street?
At this point, yes, we're going to be kind of giving information to folks about while you're out there already doing this great work for the community, here's something else you can do. In the past, they wouldn't have had materials, spray paint or some other materials that could cover up graffiti. If there's a group that wanted to do more, say off of their street, because maybe we're happy to work with folks on that as well. We were just looking at a way, we already have people out there doing great work. How could we just get another set of eyes out there and do a little bit more while they're already there?
Okay. And then if there was a group that only wanted to do graffiti work, is the program looking to eventually be set up to where once a month, we want to devote a morning to removing graffiti and would get some assignments from us, or you have to find your own graffiti to remove?
Well, we'd have to work that out because, if it gets reported, I would hate to send a group out there. We've already had somebody out there that's taking care of it or expect a group to go take care of it and then not have it responded to. So we'd have to kind of work through that. So at this point, we were just really focusing on those groups that are already in certain street sites. But if there was a group, we would be happy to work with them because there's a lot of graffiti in the community, right? And so we'd be happy to work with that group to help them do more if they were interested in doing that.
Okay, well, thank you. It just sort of occurred to me that, well, we don't really have a group that is volunteered to adopt the Veterans Memorial out here, but that is an area where 3 of the 5 benches are either have graffiti on them or have noticeable places where graffiti has been removed. To be able to go and do that, but that's not necessarily a place that we want amateur efforts
Correct.
to do that. So I understand the problem with doing that. The same with some of the guardrails and things that are around that are on bridges over bodies of water and things like that. Where
Right, you have problems with the flakage into the water system. And I appreciate that comment. I'll just let you know, on one of our gateways, someone came by as an early morning walker and they saw some naughty words on a gateway. And so they thought they were really helping us out. So they took some goof off, went home, got some goof off, came back and washed it off. So what they did is really, they really now put it in the paint surface. They made it. So we had to actually get that repaired professionally. But that's what happens when you use some of these products on the graffiti. It might not be right on the surface. And so we do have equipment and things to do, or we may, like, for instance, if it's a gateway sign.
And I would say that's probably an element as you're telling people about, we're looking for volunteers to do that. Caution them, don't take action on your own.
Solvents, correct. Yeah, but you
Right,
can see,
I think the community, graffiti is a common email that I, and I'm sure other council members, get as an indicator of something that's wrong in the community. So having a active and a visible program that is there to address it will benefit us in ways beyond just getting the graffiti removed. Thank you.
Ms. Bell.
Thank you. So I'm not acquainted with it, so I'm not sure does the city have a neighborhood coordinator or neighborhood program that reaches out and works with HOAs? I know some other cities have that, and just depending on size, and so it may not be something that we have here.
CSOs we used to.
we have neighborhood, we used to have specific neighborhood organizations. A few of them are still somewhat active. And so we connect with them on a regular basis for presentations and things like that. They're more geographically known than necessarily neighborhood or HOA known, but Lake City still has a group that's active. Tillicum's they were active, but
Yeah, but I
nobody
mean
did-
at the city, like a staff member, someone who is like a neighborhood coordinator. We don't have that here.
No, different people coordinate their
Different
programs based
programs,
on, we
okay.
don't have a specific neighborhood active person that I know of.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Anything else on that? Thanks for the update.
Okay.
Hopefully we'll get.
Yeah, I was just going to note too, we also take pictures of the graffiti, and we encourage the folks that are removing it to take a picture. We always send that through the police department. Most of the time, graffiti is one group talking to another, and they like to know what the conversation is that's happening out there. Sometimes it's just, Chachi loves Jody or something, and so that's just.
Sure.
So, but we do that. Just again, they like to be in the know. They are keeping track of that from a gang.
I did notice an Uber effort to remove graffiti on one of the gateway signs, the one in Bridgeport, and pack highway. That
Yeah,
seems to be
that was the car.
plowed through a
Yeah,
couple of
it
times,
was
and
a
that was an
touchdown.
effective way to remove any graffiti, apparently.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there you go. My next topic, if we're ready to move forward to the next topic, is just an update to the city naming policy. And so the city had updated the policy in 2016 and went through a pretty rigorous conversation about that. And so created a new policy with some step-by-step plans. And at that time, this Parks and Rec Advisory Board was selected as the internal review process before it would come to council, just to make sure that we were looking at all of the different elements. In 2021, we actually implemented our first application or did our first review. And so we went through that process, did not end up recommending the name change. But throughout the process, there were a couple, we knew kind of what we wanted to do, but there were a couple of points of order or procedural questions. And so we kind of kept track of all those things. And then following that meeting, we came and talked to council about it, got great feedback from council on the process, as well as maybe things that they wanted to see changed. Went back to the park board and talked about it, and then added it to the 2022, talked about the actual process that had happened in 2021. And then as part of the 2022 work program for park board, they reviewed the process again. They included LHAB, our Landmarks and Heritage Group, and came up with some suggestions that I think are addressing council's questions and concerns, as well as procedural things. So what you have in your packet tonight is, again, a review process, the notes on the review process, on what they thought they needed to add or what they needed to clarify. And then from a procedural perspective, making sure that we were addressing, one topic with one public hearing and not getting things mixed up. So the notes kind of clarify all of the things that they wanted to see added, which included things like how do you define broad community support? So they added some clarification that there needed to be a petition and there's something that says that more of the community understands or wants this to change instead of just one person making a recommendation. Also, the board had said the attempt at getting 600 signatures also creates public information, because sometimes you might post a public hearing or you might post in the Sub-Times that this process is happening. But if you're out there getting signatures, then that conversation starts. And so it's another way of gathering public information. So they thought that that was a good idea. They wanted to add information or acknowledge the fact that making a change, there's a cost associated with it. If it's a building or a sign, it could be that, the signage has to be updated. But if you're talking about changing the name of a road, it could affect businesses. It could affect, stationary addresses, things like that, that there is a cost associated with those things as well. We wanted to make sure that we added a timeline so that the individual putting in the application understands that there's going to be due diligence, there's going to be research, that we're going to have a review process, public hearing, and that it's not something that happens overnight. One of the things that the council noted in the resolution is that to add a name of maybe a new facility or something that didn't have a name, but to change a name, it shouldn't just happen all the time. It should be the exception. And if we're going to do it, why are we doing it? And so then to look at all of those different factors that are listed in the resolution, so that it's just a very thoughtful process and not a reaction to either an emotional situation or historic situation, but there's some thought into it regarding that, whether you do or don't change it. So I put in your packet, you'll see basically it would be an introduction that someone would get that was interested in changing the name. And so that they would come and they would get a packet that would be provided to them. That packet includes sort of a step-by-step process as to what would happen. It includes the resolution, whichever the current resolution is, and we're proposing a few changes to the current resolution. And then it would also include an application form that was quite detailed. One of the things that the past one that happened was, utilizing Dr. Claudia Thomas. Well, we know Dr. Claudia Thomas, we know her history, and so we were able to do a lot of that information and research without much information. But for the next application, it could be an individual or something that we aren't that familiar with. So we thought that the individual or organization putting in the application should do a little bit of the research for us to help us learn more about the person or the organization or the name. And then on the last page, which is, it's the last page of your packet, it's a new sort of internal step-by-step process. We were involved with this current one, but who knows when the next one's going to be. And so it just provides some step-by-steps for whoever's going to be doing the review so that they kind of make sure that they're hitting all the marks, that they're doing the review, that they're looking at this information, that when it's done, information is going back to the council, going back to the applicant, just so everybody knows what the process is. But in the resolution, you'll see the main changes that you'll see being proposed are, it's really primarily very much the same, except for we are, and it's underlined in your packet, we are, one of the questions that came up was, can city council make a recommendation? Of course you can, you're a governing body. So we just clarified that in the resolution. And also that the demonstrated community support would be a petition that includes not less than 600 signatures. We thought that, that's a 1% of your community. That's probably, it sounds like a lot, but it would mean it's an important thing. And that the petition requirement would be waived for city council. If city council provides an author or a recommendation, but that the process should still go through that public review process so that you are getting that feedback from the community. Those are basically the main changes. The other ones are more procedural, just to make sure that the park board did a great job with the public hearing, but they skipped a little bit, kind of hiccuped a little bit. They were doing a public hearing on this, and then they didn't make that recommendation, but then they thought about some other things. And so that kind of muddied the waters at the end. So we're just making it real clear that we're posting a public hearing on a specific name or more than one name or facility or more than one facility, but all the public information is going for that and we're not going outside that process. So that's what we're looking at. And that was based on information from council as well as both of the advisory boards.
Very good. Any questions? I see your light.
I just have some a question when I look at what we have in our packet. There's not a next steps element to your presentation. Are you, what are you looking for from us today, or what's the next step where we'll get a chance to change happy to glad in the resolution and whatever else we want to change?
The next step would be to bring a revised resolution to council, and that would be the next.
Councilmember Branstad, the next step is to bring that proposed resolution back to this body for your further review and consideration as part of your next regular meeting, which is Monday, April 18th.
I'm not certain, and there's four of us here today, but I'm not certain that I think I would, Mr. Mayor, I would much rather see it at a study session where we can do some talking about wording and how it's done without having to go through the formal, in a regular meeting process of making amendments and doing that. I would really want to go through this a bit more closely before I'm certain about all the wording that's in it. And would also appreciate having at least a couple more of us be able to kind of do that in a study session format that would then provide staff the input to draft a final resolution to agendize.
I don't see a problem with that because there's no sense of urgency.
We don't have any applications pending now.
Very good. And all of us are still alive, so.
And then my one other question was, when we had this concern about the one application that we processed and worked its way through, there was the question of would there be an alternative process where it's not from the public request to make a renaming, but for us as a council to do a naming or renaming?
Yeah, I think that's in there.
That is there an element of, and while this resolution maybe doesn't address that situation, I think it's also something we should probably want to come up with something that there are guidelines for ourselves if we were to want to choose to do it, that maybe is such slightly different process than the citizen-initiated process.
I think page 194 of the packet on paragraph C1 reserves the right of the city council to recommend to name or rename a city park or facility.
In that just doesn't speak to process. I mean, it would sort of allow us to just sort of, in any one of a wide variety of ways, decide to do that, and as opposed to saying how that would get produced. It doesn't need to be as specific as this, I don't think, but we should at least give ourselves some rules to play by as well.
I think the intent of the park board was to allow council, of course, to make those recommendations, and then it would go through the public review process, just like any other application. The council just wouldn't have to do the petition. But the idea is that it would then go to park board with all of the review that any application would be made. So there was that public input piece that way. And then come back to council for action. But maybe that needs to be clarified.
But if need be, we can flesh that out at a study session. Yeah, we can take a look at that. Well, I think we've got consensus that this is going forward. Great recommendations. We want to chew on it perhaps just a little bit and then tee it up for later adoption sometime this summer, looks like.
Sure.
Thank you for that.
Other questions? Okay, thanks.
Mr. Caulfield, anything else? Well, if not, then we'll move. Oh, I see. Well, you do have something else.
I do, Mayor. I would just like to let the council know that our planning manager, Courtney Burnell, is undertaking some public participation as it relates to your tree advisory ad hoc committee. And she's taken a three-pronged approach. The first is actually a survey, a 7-question survey, which if it hasn't already been launched, it's going to be launched here in the near future. The second is that this Wednesday at noon, she is hosting a 1-hour discussion called Tree Talk on all things that are trees. So again, providing folks an opportunity to provide some feedback. And then lastly, they're doing some targeted interviews with certain groups in our community, such as the Nisqually Tribe, a number of our partners, Lakeview Light and Power, the Fire District, the Health Department, the Pierce Conservation District, as well as a number of community groups to include the Center for Latino Leaders, Central Latino, the KWA, the Buhan International District folks, the Rainbow Center, the Lakewood Community Foundation, our Historical Society, as well as some other folks such as Together, Southsound, and Home Ownership Center of Tacoma, Habitat for Humanity, folks along those lines. So I just wanted to let you know that there is some public participation going under the umbrella of your tree advisory ad hoc committee. And then I'd just like to leave you with this Saturday and Sunday. Again, the city in partnership with Waste Connections is going to be hosting our spring 2022 community cleanup from 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. If you have an interest in coming out and volunteering your time just to help out, would certainly more than welcome you. If not, feel free to bring by some of your excess stuff that you don't need to get rid of. So with that, Mayor, that's my report. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Caulfield? Sure, Ms. Bell.
Thank you. I have a quick one. So is all of the information about what Ms. Brunel is doing going to be on the website?
The survey, the short answer is yes, Councilmember Bell.
The only reason I'm asking is because people have asked about translations a lot. So if it's on the website, they can easily pull down on Google Translate and should be able to translate all the information out there. So I just wanted to make sure that that was reiterated. It's just at the top. I think Jim has it up there.
That is affirmative,
So-
Councilmember Bell. In addition,
Yeah.
the documents that we are putting out on the website, like for example, we're trying not to do PDF documents.
Right.
So that the
They can
documents,
translate.
they can be translated. That's correct. And
Yeah.
that's a.
So I
that's
just
a-
wanted to point that out again and thank you for that.
Yep. You're welcome, Councilmember.
So on the ad hoc tree committee work, I appreciate some of the public participation points you made. I just want to confirm that there isn't a requirement, nor have we set one, for there to be a city council liaison. The purpose was for this group to really act independently and then give us their recommendation. That was my impression of what we set up.
Actually, there's another step involved there because this is a change to the code. It will first go to your planning commission, and your planning commission will then hold some public hearings as well as study sessions leading up to that. They will then seek public input and feedback on whatever the ad hoc committee provides to them. The planning commission will then make a recommendation to this body, which will also include the recommendation from your ad hoc committee. That will then come forth here. You will have some study sessions and public hearing and an opportunity for people to provide feedback at that level as well.
Are we getting decent feedback from Ms. Brunel that the members of the ad hoc tree committee are fully participating and we have pretty good participation, attendance?
As far as I know, Mayor, I have not heard otherwise.
Okay, very good. Okay, now we turn to council comments. Mr. Brandstetter.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, the next meeting of the Public Safety Advisory Committee is going to be Wednesday. And we've recently gotten a variety of things that include actions taken and not taken by the legislature, and the report on last year's activity and that from the police chief. And so I was just looking for some input from the rest of the council. Are there some items that we now would like the Public Safety Advisory Committee to look at and offer us some feedback or seek some feedback on from the community in the area of public safety? We gave them a pretty bare bones work plan because it was being done prior to any changes and a full evaluation by the chief of an impact of past legislation. And they have really only 2 items left on their work plan to really work on. And one of those is to, well, they have 3, but one of those was to advise the chief about strategies to advertise and promote compliance with the changes to the fireworks rules that go into effect this July 4th. And the other was to do some review about looking at public safety diversion activities, such as both within the city and that the city is influenced by in the county. But if the newer information has raised some other things that we would like them to look at, they're available. But I need to know if there's anything you want me to put in front of them and to both test their interest and willingness.
You know, I have a thought as I'm sitting here listening. It seems to me a task for them that might be fruitful would be some sort of business community survey on public safety. You know, how they feel things are going, in so many words, in their business, and what suggestions for improvement would they like to see. And that could be coordinated with the Chamber of Commerce. It might be coordinated with Ms. Newton in her capacity and the BRE piece, but it might be a good piece of work for the Public Safety Advisory Committee to put together, work with Ms. Smith and maybe Ms. Newton, and then send it out either electronically and get some good data and feedback, certainly with input from the chief, so that we can really get a better sense of, you know, quote unquote, how they feel, how they perceive issues with public safety in the city. And I can tell you anecdotally, because I have people call me, as they probably do you, there are people that are a little bit testy about what they see as sort of rampant shoplifting or crazy activities in the town center parking lots, or any number of things that might relate to property or persons crimes. And it would be helpful to know from the citizen and business owners' perspective how they believe things are going, other than what we receive from the annual police report. And it might be, you know, might be a good match, but there might be a disconnect. And it's a disconnect that I think that we should chew on collectively.
Okay, I can put that in front of them.
What do you guys think?
And that's all I really have, Mr. Mayor.
Ms. Bell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The only thing I have to report is that I attended the Arts Commission meeting today, and that was great. They talked about the different utility wraps that they are approving and getting ready to put up, and also went over that the next, and they did a little bit on the Real 96, a little recap. So that was nice, what is nice and what a successful event it was, and how to, you know, make it even better next year. And the next event will be May 21st, and it's at the Colonial Plaza, and it's the Dancing in the Streets event. So look forward to that. And then summer is packed with a lot of great events that I think that the Arts Commission is going to be involved with. So that's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Moss.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. LMCC will be at the 21st Dancing in the Street. We will probably be doing a little dancing too. But anyway, I just wanted to say that my power went out at 5:15, and I just got word it came on at 9 o'clock. So I'm excited to go home and can get into my garage.
Well, thank you. I wanted to start off by reflecting on the Champions for Youth Breakfast and the various video segments that we all did, and as well as other members of the community. I thought it was a well-done event. It kind of makes me think, as I listened to Mr. Jones in his youth council report, wonder how the CISL folks can perhaps serve as, you know, trusted adults in that capacity, or at least to steer youth that are having challenges maybe to appropriate mental health services through Greater Lakes or elsewhere. But they are in contact with youth in the schools. I'm hopeful that they are anyway. Maybe something to reflect on as we chat with those folks that are doing the good work there. But it was a good breakfast, and I think people appreciated all of us attending. We heard a little bit about the ad hoc tree committee work from Mr. Caulfield, so I'm good with that. The business owner that spoke from Ponders, it sounds like we have her in touch with Ms. Dodsworth, and she will learn how she can perhaps avail herself of some resources for some public art there. Over for our school district and the youth council report, we've got the youth summit coming up in May. I don't think we've got anything scheduled between the city council and the board prior to that date, but it might be worth putting something on the calendar after that date so we can kind of have an after action review. And we haven't had a meeting with the school district for some time, a joint session since the last election. So it might be good to schedule that for sometime in the summer and maybe reflect on the information gleaned from the youth council report, perhaps so we can give them input as they start their new school year in the fall? I'm not sure. What do you think?
Well, my only thought on that, Mr. Mayor, is I'd really like to see if we could do something a little bit earlier so that we can provide some feedback to the current youth council.
Oh,
You
sure.
press it out into the summer with an idea of something in the fall, you know, you have
You're thinking
some
of doing-
turnover on the youth council in that regards. And as they mentioned, both being heard and getting some feedback, even if it isn't what they want, in a timely way is.
I'm just trying to
helpful.
think through the logistics. So they've got the youth council set sometime in May. I forget the exact date. It's on my calendar. You know, Ms. Schumacher, it's like the 11th or the 22nd, something like that.
May 21st, Mayor.
21st. So would your thought be to do it prior to that or after
Well,
that?
I'd say if we're going to engage ourselves in some
Mhm.
discussions with the school board, and even though we would then be providing the youth council some feedback to say, based on what you gave to us, this is what we in the school board discussed, even though we would be telling them for the next school year that we're going to look to be able to make some things positively. That would be, I think, a good goal.
Okay. I think we can try to work that out in some way, somehow.
I'll ask again, Mayor.
Oh, you've already asked, huh? Got it. Okay, well, I guess all we can do is keep asking, but that would be a good thing for us to do. Other than that, as we note tonight, we've got 3 council members absent for spring break reasons. I will likewise be absent Monday, this coming Monday on the spring break deal. And so I can either chime in or certainly Deputy Mayor Moss can lead our study session that night. So I just want to let you know in advance. So, and if there's no other comments or alibis for the good of the order, we're adjourned.